Dear Ambassador Rode, distinguished heads of and deputy heads of foreign international diplomatic missions in Kosovo, honorable government and assembly members, colleagues from civil society, esteemed media representatives, and friends, it is a privilege to stand before all of you today for the third year in a row at the opening of the largest regional event in Kosovo. As I reflect on this moment, I feel both pride and a deep sense of accomplishment. When we first envisioned the summit, it was during a time of significant political and social challenges that threatened dialogue at every level. Regrettably, those challenges have only intensified over the past 3 years. And yet, here we are, resisting, growing, and prevailing. The organizers of the Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit are investing immense effort to keep at least track 2 dialogue channels open and strengthen civic initiatives that aim to be inclusive. While this should not have been a struggle, it has been. Each of the 3 partner organizations have faced unique obstacles, ranging from discreditation and smear campaigns to technological sabotage and increased security measures that frankly feel more like intimidation tactics. And yet, despite these hurdles, we are here. More importantly, you are here. Our work is often slow to yield tangible results, but we have seen enough progress to inspire us to continue, even when the personal cost is high. For this, I owe immense gratitude to my dedicated team, to our committed partners, to our generous donors, the National Endowment for Democracy, the German Federal Foreign Office, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and Smart Balkans, our esteemed panelists, and each and every one of you in this room today. Together, all of you can help keep us anchored, remind us to put citizens and their dignified life at the forefront of our daily work, because if we lose sight of human dignity, we lose both peace and democracy. NSI and our partners KCSS and Sbanker stand against that, and we will strive to remain a rare healthy tissue of our damaged, dialogue-deprived social fabric. I hope that this event we put together over the next 2 days satisfies your professional curiosity, inspires you, and helps us understand each other better, but above all, encourages you to keep up the good work. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the summit.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear ambassadors, dear institutional representatives, colleagues from civil society, from supporters of this event. KCSS is delighted to be one of the co-organizers of Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit now for the 3rd time on the road. We, as an organization, have invested several years in enhanced regional stability, security, and prosperity. KCSS contributed and participated in various projects in the benefit of regional cooperation. KPDS is certainly a growing platform which unites think tanks from different communities in Kosovo with the shared goal of promoting multi-ethnicity, a value being increasingly challenged in our region. This is a genius platform of what I would call a second-track diplomacy, because it provides alternative space for intellectuals from Kosovo and the region to contribute with their perspectives and how to further enhance trust between communities. When speaking of disputes, KCSS promotes actively normalization of a relation between Kosovo and Serbia, and undoubtedly the agreement that has been reached in the Brussels and its annex in Ohrid manifests an acceptable document that we commend the instances of Kosovo government in its full implementation, and if possible in its signatures. The existing dialogue process should be framed on the basis of balanced implementation of the agreement. while we remain critical of the steps of Kosovo government when it comes to the participation in dialogue, we also have been deeply disappointed with the letter of former Prime Minister of Serbia of formally withdrawal from dialogue, which later was claimed that this letter has been withdrawn. We hope that the process of normalization will go on track quickly, and we hope that we as a civil society will be able to provide contribution that this process of normalization get on track as soon as possible. Our goal with this event is also to send positive messages when it comes to ensuring that the process of the normalization in the region and normalization in Kosovo goes in track as soon as possible. We look forward to productive discussion in the KPDS and hope that messages that come from this event are going to help to the process of both internal and regional healing when it comes to improving of the relations in the regional level. Thank you very much, and we hope that you will enjoy the event.
Thank you, Mentor, for your speech, and Jovana. Now we are honored to have the U.S. Ambassador to Kosovo and the German Ambassador to Kosovo give keynote address to this event. The two states, two countries that have been a cornerstone of supporting democratic development in Kosovo and have been our best friends. And so please, Ambassador Hovinier, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Mirëmëngjes, dobre jutro. I find always at the starts of these things, it's kind of like the morning after a party. Everybody's slightly hungover and doesn't quite know how the day is going to go. You've got a little bit of coffee in your systems, but you're just not sure, and you're conserving energy. So I hope to bring a little bit of energy to get this conversation started. I'm honored to join you all today. My colleague, Ambassador Rode, all of you. This event is a reminder of the indispensable role that civil society can play, must play, does play in advancing democracy and attracting and shaping the future of this region. Can I just make a point really quick on civil society? Because I occasionally meet with people here who are in civil society, and they will say something like, I am just a member of civil society, I can't affect change, or we write our paper, we do things. May I remind you, people who've been members of civil society would include Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, Mahatma Gandhi, Vladimir Lenin. I could go on. Civil society changes the world. It has, it does, it will. And this gathering is another opportunity for the civil society of Kosovo to come together to help change a difficult circumstance and to make a better life for all of the citizens of this country without regard to ethnicity. I think that's incredibly valuable, I think it's incredibly powerful, and we commend you for it, and we're proud to be here sponsoring, supporting these events. So these efforts to foster good neighborly relations, to foster economic cooperation, to ensure that voices that are not always heard are heard and taken seriously and factor into what happens are critically important. What I don't want to do this morning in the 4 minutes I have remaining is spend a lot of time talking about things that I've talked about a lot before. For those who've been in Kosovo for a while, you're probably familiar with some of the messages from the United States right now of how we see the circumstance in the effort to advance a normalized relationship between Kosovo and Serbia with the ultimate goal of mutual recognition. That remains the goal of the United States of America, pure and simple. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time laying out some of the concerns we have with policy choices made in Belgrade and with policy choices made in Pristina. They are real, and we're on record. We expect both governments to act in complete compliance with all of the obligations they've entered into in the dialogue. We expect them to take dialogue seriously. I do want to make a point about dialogue. One of the things that I find surprising in my various conversations with various actors here in Kosovo is this unstated assumption that there is a path other than dialogue. Is this suggestion that if the Americans or the Germans or pick your favorite people would somehow just snap our fingers, wave a magic wand, have the right conversation, these problems would go away and Kosovo would immediately be a full member of NATO and a full member of the EU and all of the rest. You've heard it. The world doesn't work that way, and I got to be clear about that. So if it were up to the United States by ourselves, if we were imperial Rome at the height of its power and all countries bowed before us and did exactly what we directed, which is not the case in the world today. If you look around the globe, we still believe we exercise important influence around the planet, but we're not alone. We would see Kosovo more fully integrated right now into European and Euro-Atlantic institutions. Serbia would have come to greater terms with the reality of a sovereign, independent, multi-ethnic, democratic, peaceful neighbor to its south. That is what we want. But I don't see how you become a member of the EU without concurrence from the EU. And that means concurrence from the member states of the EU. I don't see how you become a full member of NATO without concurrence from all of the members of NATO. As you all know, some of those states still have not themselves officially accepted the reality of a sovereign, independent, democratic, multi-ethnic Kosovo the way we have. You got to convince them. We want to help. That means working in the process established by the very institutions. My grandfather had a saying once, and please pardon the slightly crass character to it, if you want to join a club, don't pee on the clubhouse door. My point would be, we want to support Kosovo in this approach. We want to support Kosovo in its European and Euro-Atlantic integration. We have done a lot, presidents, secretaries of state, ambassadors, others, to advance that. We know the aspirations, the very legitimate aspirations of the Kosovan people to achieve that. We want to help. We look to any government of Kosovo to give us the best possible arguments, the best possible ammunition in these conversations. The more we can show a sovereign, democratic, multi-ethnic, prosperous, successful democracy, the easier it is. So, a few things. I looked at your schedule. The things you're going to talk about, they feel like the right questions to me. I want to, if you'll indulge me for a few more moments, I want to give a couple of thoughts about some of the questions on your agenda, and then I'm going to be done. The first, I saw you have a session, I think right next, about does the dialogue need a reset? I'm so tired of that question. I'm so tired. It feels, one of my ambassadors I used to work for used to use the term all the time, navel gazing, something that, with all due respect to my European Union colleagues, you're very, very good at. Spending more time thinking about the internal machinations and functions of your internal decision-making process than actually thinking about the outcomes of the decisions and the strategic implications of that. That is not the American criticizing the EU. We do it too, but it's always easier to see it in the other. Stop the navel gazing, please, on the dialogue. If we didn't have this dialogue, we'd invent another one. Guess what it would have? It would have Kosovo, it would have Serbia, it would have the European Union facilitating it in some way because Kosovo's future is in Europe, and it would have support from the United States and other key partners. That's what we would invent. If we started from scratch tomorrow, what would we invent? What we have. What we need is a renewed commitment to the dialogue from everybody, the internationals, government of Kosovo, government of Serbia. What we need is an end to some of this entering into decisions without intentions to implement them. What we need is a seriousness and a purpose to this dialogue. So you can call it a reset, you can call it a recommitment, you can call it a new approach, you can call it a renewed approach, you can call it a more energetic approach. We absolutely need that. And we need that from all sides. I mean, we have a lot of opportunities for that. My government will change on January 20th. I can't tell you how it's going to change yet, but I guarantee it will. The European Union has now finished its elections with a new slate of leadership coming. It's an obvious moment to take stock of where we are and think about where we want to be and make some changes. I don't see the natural processes quite as much in Pristina or Belgrade right now. There will be elections in Kosovo, as we all know, in February. That could offer an opportunity, but I think this is more urgent, of this renewed, reinvigorated approach. And I would say the same for Belgrade. We've got to get past perpetual crisis management. We've got to get past perpetual finger pointing. We've got to get past perpetual lack of readiness to look at how any one party might be part of the problem and think through solutions. Anyone who's spent any time in international relations and academic theory has spent time on theories of negotiations, and the most successful negotiators always are thinking about win-wins. They're always thinking about how do I get what I want, but how do I do it in a way so my colleague gets some what he wants to, because this isn't going to be a one-off. We have a process. We got to build some mutual benefit. Both sides have to show they've gotten something. Now, the United States wants to see that without any compromise in these fundamentals for Kosovo. It would not be a win for any change in Kosovo's sovereignty or its independence or its territorial integrity or its democracy. But it's also not a win when minority communities do not have their rights respected. I spent a lot of time in the Adasari process and since then working on these very important issues. So that's one theme I hope you'll talk a lot about. Second theme, sustaining Euro-Atlantic focus on the Western Balkans. Well, I only have a few things to say there. I would encourage this government, and I would encourage, not my job to encourage the government of Serbia, but I think it's good policy, to be very thoughtful with a new American leadership coming, with a new European Union leadership coming. How do you want to introduce yourselves? And how do you want to introduce this issue set to them? And perhaps you don't want to introduce it in a way that has a lot of finger pointing, I'm right, they're wrong, or perhaps you don't want to introduce it in a way where it's perpetual crisis management. This is a time to be thoughtful. This is a time to put the issues on the table, dispassionately, objectively, clearly, but introduce it as something that they are actually attracted to want to work on, not to something that they just feel like, oh, here's another problem we have to deal with. Third point, there's enormous opportunity right now. You have a panel, I think, potential, the EU Western Balkans Growth Plan. It's always dangerous when an American ambassador talks about a really significant European Union initiative. We don't vote, we don't pay, we aren't in it. So we get to have all the luxury of seeing the benefit from it without having to do a lot. Although we have given, surprisingly, our free and unsolicited advice. My point here is I think this is actually really powerful. I think the growth plan is an important tool to advance all the countries in the region the way the European Union hopes and wants. It's important that this be done well. It's important that the government of Kosovo, the government of Serbia, the other governments are serious in the reforms they put on the table and actually carry them out for the promise of growth and integration to the European common market, which is an amazingly positive thing for all countries. So I hope you will talk a little bit about that. We look forward to the outcomes of the next couple of days. To the extent my embassy, and I suspect I can speak for my colleague who's about to speak next anyway, but to the extent you have outcomes you would want policy leaders in Kosovo to be familiar with, we're happy to help ensure they are familiar with the outcomes of these conversations. I wish you luck, and I thank you for what you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a speech I think we all needed to hear, or at least I needed to hear, and giving us that energy in the morning as you promised. Next, I want to invite also a dear friend of KPDS and civil society in Kosovo and the region, German ambassador to Kosovo, Mr. Rode.
Dear Giovanna, dear mentor, dear Badi, from the three organizing NGOs, you know, I'm standing here and we support you because we want you to keep up the good work. And it's always good to speak a second because then I can keep myself short. But I will speak about some things which I talked also about in last week's. You know, when I read the title, I thought instead of ethno-political dynamics, rather ethno-political dysfunctionalities would be a more fitting description of the current situation in the region. And I've been here now for 4 years, and, you know, seeing the ups and also the downs. And looking at the current Kosovo-Serbia relationship, you know, even today you see inflammatory statements, language, use of extreme positions. At least verbal tensions are flaring not only on the Kosovo-Serbia side, but also on other fronts in the region. I mean, you see on the weekend the Macedonia, Bulgaria spat on an opera visit, is there a missing flag or not, you know, and immediately you see statements. Or 2 days ago, announcement of Republika Srpska officials of new school books with a clearly ethno-nationalistic narrative. I mean, the others are not without guilt also. Or I wrote down here the recent speech of the Serbian president. The constant use of extreme terms, ethnic cleansing, repression, when describing the situation in the north is not helpful. Nor, in the summer, the banning of an NGO initiative, which has been successful, done for 2 years, the Meridita Dobar Dan Festival, for the first time banned to be held in Serbia. I see similar terms when Kosovo politicians describe the situation sometimes in the Preševo Valley. I mean, clearly there are things going on which are not helpful. Or, I see identity politics. Do you have to name streets in Banska on the day of the anniversary after the killed police officer? I'm not so sure. Yesterday, I attended with a lot of my fellow colleagues the commemorative events of the killed KP officer. This was really a watershed moment because you saw pure violence exhibited by malign actors. And as a result, we as friends of Kosovo, NATO has beefed up its security. And the good story here is that we see the possibility of malign actors to do harmful things violently considerably reduced. And I would echo what Jeff has said. The biggest obstacle to a normalization of relations is the total absence of political will at the moment to normalize relations. To put it, Serbia is basically defending the status quo and Kosovo wants to change it. And I would say rightfully so. Also Jeff has exposed. So we want a sovereign Kosovo and we want to achieve that Kosovo is a rightful member in all the organizations which are always mentioned, whether it's NATO, EU, or the Council of Europe. Anyways, after 4 years, enough with pessimistic comments. I still think you use the right term, dynamic, because change is possible and we need to remain engaged. Staying put or containment is not an alternative, especially given Russia's also destructive behavior in this region. And what we need is integration, reconciliation, and compromise. And the road to achieve that is on the table. As Jeff said, there is no alternative to dialogue. When you have actors, you need to engage. And it's called, the Brussels Ohrid agreements. We need to re-engage urgently. There's this new team in Brussels to take up the enlargement chapter. And I say it again and again, Kosovo needs to be active on this ASMM issue because it's a clear path to integrate also the Kosovo Serb minority and also to show that Kosovo shows with this that for them this agreement is alive. Otherwise, the EU road remains elusive for both Kosovo and Serbia. You cannot convince members if you cannot achieve the minimum. And I'd like to say, if Kosovo or if the EU doesn't enlarge to the Western Balkans, the people of the Western Balkans will continue to move to the EU. They vote with their feet. And if I see our visa numbers, they are as high as in the last years, and that is not good for the region. And this goes for all Western Balkan countries. And we have great options at the moment on the table. We have the growth facility, I think close to 900 million for Kosovo, Serbia, several billions, other countries too. We have the Berlin process, as you have seen also publicly. My Western Balkan envoy is heavily engaged to reach a compromise before the summit on the 14th of October. We can block more or less a dozen agreements which are blocked since some years. And for me, the Council of Europe membership remains on the table. And this is especially important also, for minority rights and questions. And allow me as German ambassador to also promote a bit my country. I think it's not only that we, support platforms like this. We remain engaged. We want Kosovo, we want the region to succeed, to integrate fully into Europe. We are going, I would say, the extra mile. And I would like to pinpoint in this afternoon we will have a public debate, press conference with where we publish a study by the German economic team, which is advising Kosovo's government also on the benefits of Kosovo joining the SEPA mechanism. It will benefit millions for Kosovo. And I mentioned already the Berlin process. We are working heavily to achieve tangible results. We just inaugurated a bilateral climate partnership with Kosovo. We have a regional one. And we continue to take up Kosovo's delegation, since Kosovo is not yet an UN member, in the as part of the German delegation together with GIZ in the climate COP negotiations. Allow me one last word on the role of NGOs. I think it's important. What is NGOs? You are part of society. Society needs to be active. There's an accommodation by the majority for the minority, but also vice versa. So my message also to, I would say, and specifically to all NGOs, but also to my minority NGOs, Kosovo is here to stay, and my message is integrate, integrate, integrate. We want, of course, parallel structures. You don't have Serbian or Kosovo post offices in Macedonia or Northern Macedonia or Serbia, and but the way forward is, as I said, again, laid out in the Ohrid agreements. You do it in a way which is political, palpable to all sides. But boycotts, as done by official representatives of minority, is not the way forward. Kosovo government has reached out, resigning from institutions, was a mistake, is a mistake, and should not be repeated. And at the end, a simple sentence, language is a tool. Learn the languages of the minority and vice versa. The biggest language in the region is Serbo-Croat, but in this country, Albanian is the majority language. So you need also to accommodate the majority. And I think these are concrete tools. I grew up in Switzerland where everybody speaks 3 or 4 languages because there is accommodation. And we need to continue on this road. Last word, yesterday you saw this trust index published on the relationship between minority and majority. And one of the points was also integration, by the minority into Kosovo society, historic narratives, school books. And I want to close with, again, the word keep up the good work, and I wish you fruitful discussions, and I can support, or I can confirm, like the United States, whoever governs in Germany will stay on Kosovo's side. We will also stay engaged in the region, that rather sooner than later you will become full members of the Euro-Atlantic institutions. Thank you.
Very inspiring speeches, both. Thank you to both ambassadors. 2 countries that have really been stronger supporters of our region, of the region's aspiration to join Euro-Atlantic community. And this is exactly why we have picked this theme, because we feel strongly in our region there seems to be 2 competing realities. A reality where we promote ethnocentric policies or ethnopolitical radicalization, and the other where we say we want a future in the European Union and NATO. And as both ambassadors says, we want you there, but we want to see also some progress. Now, Bardi had some traffic issues. He's the 3rd partner, so I apologize for the delay, but let us hear just briefly also from Bardi from Spunken.
Well, thank you, Donny. I'll just say a few words. Dear ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and friends, I want to welcome you to the third edition of the Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit. I'm here today on behalf of Zvunker, but more importantly as someone who, like many of you, feels deeply connected to this region and, more importantly, to its future. Though we come from different backgrounds and experiences, we all share the same hope that this region can move forward together. Our theme this year, Radical Realities, Ethnopolitical Dynamics and Euro-Atlantic Integration in the Western Balkans, speaks to the dual forces shaping our reality. On one side, nationalism and authoritarianism are gaining ground. On the other, many of us remain committed to the belief that the future of the Western Balkans lies in democracy, cooperation, and Euro-Atlantic integration. Yet, if we're honest, the gap between those two paths feels like it's widening. And that's something we can't avoid facing. The last year has been tough for all of us. The Banjska attack on September 24th was a stark reminder of how fragile peace is in the region. It reminded us that violence, unfortunately, still holds appeal for some, and that progress can feel distant. The Kosovo-Serbia dialogue has gone backward, tensions are deepening, and internationally, there's a growing sense that the European Union's influence is fading. The path to EU enlargement has become uncertain, and public trust in that vision is understandably weakening. At the same time, we've seen civil liberties under pressure here in Kosovo, press freedom has been threatened, and there are growing concerns about how the media and civil society can freely operate. Across the region, in places like Serbia, human rights activists and liberal voices are also facing increasing repression. Meanwhile, autocrats are becoming more confident, using fear to silence those who stand up for democracy, and these aren't distant issues. They affect how we live, how we work, and how we imagine the future for our societies. In this room, there are activists, diplomats, friends, and partners. All of us connected by a shared commitment to a better, more just future. And to our international partners, I want to express my gratitude for your ongoing support. But I also know, and many of you do too, that sometimes the value we talk about, democracy, human rights, and accountability, don't always match the actions we see. It's not always easy to square that gap, and it leaves us with difficult questions about what more can be done. But these are conversations we need to have if we are serious about progress. That said, the future of Kosovo and the Western Balkans is not something external forces alone can shape. Ultimately, it rests with us. This is our home, and we know its complexities and potential better than anyone. While international support is invaluable, real progress will come from what we build here on the ground through our efforts and our connections to the communities we serve. Now, one of the most urgent challenges we face today is the rise of ethno-nationalism and populism, especially among younger generations. These ideologies erode trust, sow division, and pull us further apart. If we don't work to rebuild trust across our communities, these divisions will only deepen, and that's not a future any of us want in this region. The good news, though, is that we're not powerless. This summit is an opportunity to have real conversations about what we can do right now. While we're all familiar with the broad challenges, the focus here isn't just on identifying problems. It's on finding ways to move forward. Progress may not come overnight, but even small steps can lead us to something bigger. Over the next few days, there's potential to build stronger networks, develop clearer strategies, and live with a renewed sense of shared purpose. Whatever the outcomes, coming together itself has a value, and the potential to make a real difference lies in these discussions. So thank you for your patience, and thank you all for being here, and I look forward to engaging with each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to invite the first panel with distinguished speakers. I know U.S. Ambassador has to leave us early, so we will excuse him, and I don't know the schedule of German Ambassador if he will be able to stay, but yeah. So let me invite the moderator of the first panel, Milica Andrić-Rakić, and thank you, Ambassador, again. Thank you. And the fellow panelists, Tefta Kelmendi from ECFR Paris, Marko Prelec from International Crisis Group, and our dear friend Dragiša Mijačić. Yes. Now, literally the floor is yours, Milica. Yeah, so we started a bit late. We apologize, so we might extend a bit the panel, but I hope you bear with us. It's still the morning, so I guess we have the energy.
It'll be at the expense of the lunch. I know you'll love that. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the first panel. I guess it's one of the more difficult topics, and given the circumstances, the things are not going into the right direction, so the atmosphere might be a bit gloomy, but I hope that as the day goes, we get to a better place and maybe even some solutions coming out of this dialogue, as particularly here, as even some of the ambassadors kindly requested. So first of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Milica Andrić-Rakić. I'm a program manager at New Social Initiative. I will be leading this discussion with Tefta Kelmendi, who is the Deputy Director for the wider Europe program of the European Council for Foreign Relations. I'd say welcome, but you here are equal hosts as we are. Marko Prelec, who should be told welcome. He is joining us from the region. He's been working on the issues related to the Western Balkan, in particular Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo and Serbia since the 90s, and he started familiarizing with these issues through the investigations at the ICTY. And he's also the founder of a major think tank in Kosovo, the BPRG, or Balkan Policy Research Group. And finally, we have here Director of Institute for Territorial and Economic Development, Dragiša Mijačić. He is also a consultant, a researcher on decentralization and public investment governance. So again, welcome. I hope we have a nice discussion. I will start this discussion with Dragiša, which in no way is influenced by the fact that we are both from Zubin Potok, or that he's known me since I was a child, pretty much. But it's influenced by the fact that currently, or not just currently, in the past 10 years, the North has been a hotspot, let's say, of the dialogue, and is currently the biggest problem, I'd say, in the dialogue. And Dragiša is someone who, as I said, comes from Zubin Potok, pretty much represents the heart and soul of people in the North. So I actually wanted to ask about how the current deterioration of the dialogue has made people feel in the North. What are the consequences on the ground? And in the past 2-3 years, we've been hearing the dialogue has no alternative, that it has to continue. But the history has taught us that it does have an alternative. We've had multiple periods in the past, between 1990 and 2005 without dialogue, then between 2008 and 2011, then between 2018 and 2020. So we can definitely go for long spans of time without a dialogue. So what if the bad scenario continues? How will that reflect on the Kosovo sub-community? We've heard here today, again, calls for integration of the community. Will that happen if something doesn't change, if there is no reset in the dialogue?
Thank you, Milica. I hope I remember all the questions. Those are difficult questions. But before saying anything, I really would like to thank the organizing for having me. And once again, I said that yesterday, I think this is really one of the most important events that brings different communities and different people from the whole region. And this is the, I would say, the last group standing who still believes in a dialogue. And we are shrinking in numbers, but we are still, a couple of us, few of us, we are still believing that there is a possible to solve these issues on a peaceful way. And I really would like to thank the organizers, and I hope that we will have the opportunity to speak next year, maybe about some brighter future on the perspectives of the dialogue. The second thing I want to make, the whole concept is, well, Milica inspired me on something. So the title of the conference is Radical Realities. And to be honest, I forgotten this title when I came here last night, but when I found out last night, I started thinking about it. And to be honest, it's a very radical title. And it really triggers me in various ways, and I'm trying not to be radical in my notes, in my speeches, but always drags me in that direction. So I will try really to be positive as much as possible, or at least to be a realist in a few words that I am going to say. One positive thing is, if somebody would tell to me, like years ago, the two people from Zubin Potok will be today with you in Pristina and talk about the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo, I would say no chance. So this is really a remarkable thing, that things are going to some direction. Things are going to the way the two Kosovo Serbs are here at the panel with their expertise, trying to offer you a piece of the analysis that maybe you will take in a positive way or in a negative way, it doesn't matter, but at least we are here and we are talking with each other. And that is really a remarkable achievement of the dialogue. So no matter we are going to say the dialogue doesn't work, things are very bad, stuff, and that is true, and I'm going to that. But this is really, the stuff that I mentioned, this is really quite a big achievement. So when we are talking about Kosovo Serbs, since I've been asked about that, I would say that we are living in a challenging, I wanted to say radical reality, but let's put a little bit nice word in a challenging reality. And this challenging reality especially came with this government. So it started like 4 years when this government came, it changed the reality on the ground in various ways with their unilateral and uncoordinated actions. And that changed a lot of things on the ground. For better or for worse, we don't know, things are still moving, but it created changes. And it created changes alongside of the dialogue. So the dialogue itself hasn't been helpful in this regard. International community didn't have an answer, or haven't had an answer for this one. So we saw a lot of statements from Queen countries, we saw a lot of statements from the EU, we saw also some policy response from all these international actors, but reality is deteriorating. It's coming from bad to worse. So what we had in these 4 years, we had various kind of protests, and then we had leaving the institutions, and then we had the barricades, and then we had peaceful barricades, and then we had violent barricades, and then we had fights, and we have Banjska, and then we had, and now we are in a stage of non-resistance. This is the terminal stage of the Serbian community, especially in the north. And when we are talking about this, the north is very specific, but the Serbs in the south, or living all across Kosovo, they all face difficulties. Let me remind you about the shooting in Strpce. Let me remind you about different kind of events all across Kosovo, west, east, everywhere, south, neighborhood in the neighboring of Pristina. We have also some events in Pristina as well. So things are really going in a very bad direction. So we will have this situation where the Serbs pull out from the political life. And what is the end game here? I've been telling this many times. The end game is Serbs not to be a political factor in Kosovo. That's the end game. It's not the end game the Serbs will leave Kosovo. There will always be Serbs who will live there. But there will not be a political factor. And the key question for me is whether it is good for Kosovo or it is bad for Kosovo not to have Serbs as a political factor. And I'm quite sure you are tired of Serbs. You know, Srpska lista, they are not constructive, they are, or other politicians, you know these Serbs, they are always resisting, they're always asking for something, they're always crying for something, etc., etc. But if we are thinking about the processes that we have heard from two ambassadors, from two esteemed ambassadors in their opening remarks, you will need Serbs for this. For the EU integration, Atlantic integration, regional cooperation, everything. Everything is dependent from the Serbian community. So if you don't have the deal with the Serbian community, it will be very difficult for Kosovo to advance further. And that is something that I've been telling. I told us in the last conference, and I've been telling all these years. So we need to come to some sort of the political agreement. We're not talking about security agreement or institutional. We need to come to a political agreement where we are going to accommodate the Serbian community to the level that everyone can advance further. And just to maybe to finish and to conclude in this, there are so many other things at the moment which are more important than the dialogue itself. Regional integration, European Atlantic integration, etc. And that is the future. And things will move. We have about, let's say, 6 more months to make a decision on all these things. Why 6 more months? We have a very important benchmark, which is mid of October, Berlin process, whether Kosovo will remain in the regional integration or not. Kosovo has a problem with international recognition. Now it has a problem even in regional integration. So it can be expelled from institutions where they already have been very active and as an equal partner. So then we have American elections, which is a big milestone. No matter of who is going to win, but this is a big milestone, and I'll talk about that later. And then we have Kosovo elections. So and then we have Serbs who are leaving. And then if we don't use these 6 months, and how we are going to use these next 6 months, that is going to determine the path for the next 10 years, 10, 20, even more. So now is the decisive moment. We had many times these kind of moments in the past, and I know we are all tired. We are talking about the dialogue and for so many years, but now is really, this is the final moment, whether we are going to have Kosovo Serbs as a political factor in Kosovo, or we are going to have something which Albin Kurti, Prime Minister of Kosovo, already said. He said, I'm going to solve the problem on a Croatian model, meaning we have elderly Serbs who live there, but they are not political factor. And that's also fine. But I'm quite sure in those kind of circumstances, it will be very difficult to proceed with something which is very bigger than the dialogue, which is, as I said again, EU integration and the regional cooperation. So I'll stop here. We'll have probably time for the next.
Yes, thank you, Dragiša. We might be North-centric, but I have to share as well that a lot of people are sensing this at the moment, that they're living history. I believe one of my friends said that. But I'd say that at least in the North there is a sense of huge urgency and big happenings at this moment. I'm not sure if that reflects on how people feel here in Pristina. Which is why we're expanding now a bit more on the wider or whole Kosovo. So Tafta is going to give us a outlook on how let's say the things have changed in the past since pretty much 2021. What changed in the approach to the dialogue? We've heard today from the ambassadors as well that there are several incentives coming our way that might help with the dialogue. Most are unfortunately external, so not related to Kosovo or Serbia, but we do have a new European Commission. There are expectations that both Kosovo and Serbia will reposition after the start of the new mandate. The U.S. elections are also something to hold our breaths over. Kosovo elections are coming up as well. But I would like to, at this moment at least, establish what has changed, what Kosovo's change in the approach in the dialogue brought, especially for Kosovo, and how do things look from this point forward. Given the lack of these internal incentives, meaning in Kosovo and Serbia, can these external incentives really make change?
Thank you, Melissa. Can you hear me well? Thank you, Melissa, for inviting me, and thank you to the organizers as well for inviting me. Yeah, right? Can you hear me? Ah, yeah, okay, cool. So thank you to the organizers for inviting me in this important discussion. I'm very happy to be able to share my thoughts with you here in Pristina. I think this is an important talk. A lot has happened in the past 3 years, and let me just also make sure that here I'm just sharing with you my thoughts and my reading of the situation, and I would be happy to be challenged on it. But I would like to start by the fact that from the very start of the beginning of the mandate of this government, knew that the dialogue with Serbia and engaging in a dialogue with Serbia is going to be one of its biggest challenge. And it needed to adapt a strategy in which it engages in a dialogue, all while making sure that the public support for the ruling party doesn't erode. This, I will come back to this strategy a little later, but regardless of the rhetoric and the general insistence of the current government in the beginning of the engagement in the dialogue, on the principle of sovereignty, mutual recognition, territorial integrity. The Kosovo government has expressed a form of preparedness and cooperation in the early stages to engage in a dialogue with Serbia. This has concretized with the fact that it has accepted and taken part in the 2 high-level meetings that took place in June and July 2021. We also know that these were very difficult meetings. Apparently the chemistry wasn't right. The parties had very opposite views on how they see the dialogue moving forward, but we must acknowledge that the dialogue happened, that this allowed for the platform to continue, and the Kosovo government participated in it. This actually even concretized. There was a continuation of technical level discussions that took place, also high-level meetings, which ended up and culminated with an agreement that was reached in Brussels and Ohrid on its implementation. And here again, we must acknowledge that Kosovo government accepted the agreement, despite difficulties of reaching the agreement, despite a lot of negotiations that took place before the agreement was reached. But it accepted it, and we must acknowledge it. It accepted also within the agreement the formation of the Association of Serbian Municipalities that is foreseen in it. However, all this needs to be brought back in how, in parallel to engaging in a dialogue, the Kosovo government needed to sustain this narrative that well, first it needed to distract, and again, this is my reading of the situation, I hope I can be challenged on it, but it needed to distract its public from what was being negotiated, what was being agreed in these talks, and what is going to end up in this agreement by taking actions in the north that actually strengthen this narrative that we are the government that is the first, maybe, government taking real action to extend Kosovo's sovereignty in the north. And these actions, we know what they are. I have very few minutes, I'm not going to mention what happened from 2021 to date in the north from the side of actions taken by Kosovo government. But we need to understand them with this strategy of sustaining this narrative and not necessarily of showing that we don't want to be engaged in a dialogue. However, this might have achieved the objective of the government on sustaining this public support, and this will see what happens in the election results in February. But it has unfortunately backfired in many other areas. It has put Kosovo and made Kosovo partially responsible for the dire situation in the north of Kosovo, especially with regard to the Serbian community there. It has unfortunately led to Kosovo losing the battle of narratives with Serbia in the west. We have never had a worse story of Kosovo than we have now in the Western circles, including expert community. It has isolated Kosovo from its international partners and the international community, and it has also undermined the dialogue process itself, because these actions that were intended to push back Serbia's influence in the north and fight the parallel structures is just part of the dialogue and was supposed to be addressed through the dialogue platform, including in the implementation of the Brussels-Ohrid Agreement, which foresees the more sustainable solution to the north, which would have allowed for a transit from parallel structures to institutions that are coordinated with central institutions, but allow for some dignified self-governance by the Serbian municipalities in the north. But let me come back to, so it has indeed had an impact on the implementation of the agreement itself. But the one event that put a somehow definite pause for the time being on the implementation of Brussels-Ohrid Agreement is the Banjska attack in September, organized by Belgrade. And the response also of the international community to this attack. This has, for one, created a situation in which the government of Kosovo narrative and the issue of sovereignty took traction and was even intensified in public discourse. At the same time, the Kosovo government lost trust in the dialogue and in the international community because of the response that it was expecting with regard to Serbia responsibility in this attack. And after Banjska, we could not expect a return to a pre-Banjska situation from the side of the government. And moreover, then we entered also the pre-election phase in Kosovo. And now every discourse and even every action taken in the north by a Kosovo government is actually used for electoral purposes. And that includes the closing of the post office, the Prime Minister walking over the bridge and eating in North Mitrovica. All of this is actually playing really, rather favorably in him conveying the image of the defender of sovereignty in Kosovo. I would maybe just make sure I have mentioned everything. Yeah, I would like to stop here and we maybe can come back to...
Thank you, Dr. for your first intervention. And now we're going a bit outside of our heads, I mean, us from Kosovo, and asking for external help, I guess, from Marko to see how we look on the outside. So basically in the past week, we've had some focus groups in the north. It was focused on women. But there was a question about how they see the future and the solution. We've asked that a group of 16 women in 2 focus groups, and none of them could envisage it. So they have no solutions. You ask them about the future, they tell you about the present and how dire it is, and keep repeating basically the problems that they face now. It didn't struck me. It was actually a Swiss researcher that was with me in the room that she thought it observation worthy, but since then I've started also seeing it as a pattern elsewhere. Like, for example, last night at a dinner, we had so many clever people around, but it looks like we no longer have ideas, or CSOs don't have ideas that are hard to say no to. So we do have ideas how to solve, and it's usually this government should do this and that, but basically that's not really moving them. So how do you see the underlying cause of this condition currently that we're in, or the condition that the dialogue is in, and how has that underlying cause affected the international outside look of both Serbia, Kosovo, but the EU as the mediator? I've also had thoughts on that, but maybe we can also see how it looks from to a person who's not directly involved in all of that.
Thanks, Milica. There's a phrase that's running through my head. It's apparently something that the Gen Z kids say, which is the Lulu is the Salulu. Some of you may have heard of it. It basically means delusion is the solution. When you don't know what to do in a situation, you retreat into a kind of fantasy world, and I think this is kind of where we are, because the situation is quite intractable. There really are no easy solutions, so we often pretend that what we're engaged in is going to lead somewhere, and then we pretend to be surprised when it doesn't. With respect to the dialogue, I agree with the comments of Jeff Hovenier about there not being an alternative to the dialogue. Whatever you do at the end of the day is going to involve the same four actors that we have now: the government in Belgrade, the government in Pristina, the European Union in some composition, and with the support of the United States. There's simply no other way you can do it. So that's true. On the other hand, I think to say that is not to say that we don't need a reset. Because I think if you look historically at what the dialogue has been since roughly, 2011 or so, when it started in a technical basis until today, it has had, at least in my interpretation, a consistent sort of core offer to the two parties, which was a compromise in which Kosovo, for its part, would extend, and I'm aware that this is a controversial word in the Kosovar political lexicon. I just can't think of a better alternative, so I'm not using it in a tendentious way. Would extend some kind of autonomy, some kind of additional rights of self-government to its Serb minority, and in return, Serbia would extend something like that can be described as a kind of de facto recognition to Kosovo. So it was that was the basic deal that was being offered, and at some point, quite early in the day, the institutional form, the institutional label that was given to that was the Association of the Community of Serb Municipalities. But that was just a label for what was supposed to be this kind of self-governing reality in the context of an overall normalization. That basically, that agreement seems to now be no longer possible, okay? Because a lot of the problems that it was meant to address, having to do with the governance, especially of northern Kosovo, have been resolved unilaterally by the Kosovo government. And it's very difficult to imagine now going back to a situation in which the government would say, okay, we now have removed all of these Serbian institutions and replaced them with Kosovo constitutional institutions, but now we are going to give you some self-governing framework in which Belgrade will have some kind of role. That's just not going to happen. So the heart has been taken out of the dialogue, and there's nothing really obvious to replace it with. There's not really clear what exactly we're supposed to be talking about. The other problem with the dialogue is that it's a very strange kind of dialogue between two parties right now. So I'm talking about now the concretely President Vučić and Prime Minister Kurti, who do not actually seem to want to agree on anything major. So it's a very strange sort of discussion. It's a bit like having a contract negotiation between a company that doesn't want to hire a person who doesn't want to work there. But they're supposed to argue about the terms under which they'll be employed. It's not going to really be a productive conversation. It's really the mediators and the American friends who want this to succeed, but that's not enough. You need to at least have some minimal degree of consensus about what's supposed to emerge from the dialogue, and we don't really have that now. With respect to the reputation, and actually one additional thing about this, which I think is insufficiently appreciated, and I'd like to pick up on a comment that Tefta made, which I think is quite insightful. She noted that when the Kurdi administration began to engage in the dialogue, they were concerned to maintain the strong degree of public support that they had. I would actually say you could even go further than that. If we recall, Vetfendosia won the elections not with the promise of, or at least not primarily, with the promise of extending sovereignty in the north, but instead with the promise of economic revitalization and an end to the kind of corrupt crony governments that they argued had characterized previous administrations. So clean government, good jobs, these kinds of things. That was what they won their initial support with. And gradually it has shifted. Okay, the emphasis has shifted now to Serb issues and sovereignty in the north. The dialogue, I think you would not be wrong to say that it is now primarily seen by both participants as an instrument for their domestic political appeal. Maybe a bit more within Kosovo because it's a more live issue than it is in Serbia. It's quite easy in Belgrade to forget that Kosovo kind of exists until, or at least the Kosovo Serbs exist. At least easier than it is here in Pristina. But for both. And I think as long as that's the case, as long as both are talking to each other, but really doing so in a kind of performance for their domestic audience, it's difficult to imagine that going any place good. Now, with respect to the perceptions of the partners, I think it's absolutely true that the rating of Kosovo has never been lower than it is now, I think. And you know, I think it's true that with the current American administration, I think it's fair to describe it as the most pro-Kosovo since the Clinton administration. Joe Biden is personally invested in this. It has been for many, many years. Ambassador Hovenier, as you heard today, was involved with Kosovo issues at a much earlier stage in his career. Clearly somebody who's a committed friend to Kosovo. To have burned that much political capital as Kosovo has done is an extraordinary negative achievement. I think we are moving into a phase, and I think this is something that is not appreciated in the government, in which the reputation of Kosovo as being primarily the former victim of Serbian oppression under Milosevic and the current victim of unfair Serbian attitude and refusal to recognize, et cetera, is giving way to the reputation of Kosovo as a highly nationalistic government that mistreats its largest and most significant minority, but not only that minority, its minorities in general, and that does not really have their best interests at heart. And that is likely to, you can already see that shift taking place. I think it is likely to deepen and accelerate. I think a couple of other things that I wanted to note. With respect to Serbia, this may sound cynical, but I think the reality is that Serbia is primarily seen today through the prism of other issues that are objectively more important. So it's seen through the perspective of its role in the war in Ukraine and in energy transition with respect to lithium supplies and other things, where Serbia is in a position to play a constructive role outside the Western Balkans, and that simply outweighs the fact that it is seen as being recalcitrant and uncooperative with respect to Kosovo. Although even on that scene, it's seen as less uncooperative than the Kosovo government is. It may be maddening, and I can sympathize with this, wholeheartedly, that the government in Belgrade seems to be getting away with arming and training a paramilitary group that killed a policeman and was preparing to kill many more, in what may have been an attempt to wrest control of a large chunk of territory away from its neighbor. And we're all sort of okay with that, but that is the fact. And I think to make it maybe less maddening, I think the fact is that Serbia is completely aware, the Vučić administration is completely aware that they were caught doing something totally unacceptable, and they're aware that they can not do it again, at least not in the current geopolitical configuration. And they are paying the price for it in the loss of their institutions in northern Kosovo. Just to close on a slightly more hopeful and optimistic note, I mean, there's no real mystery, and I imagine this is probably what you heard from the focus groups, although I don't want to put words in people's mouths. There's no mystery to what's needed here. I mean, I think what at least I see the Serb community of Kosovo needing is, security, jobs, healthcare, education, and some kind of voice in governance. It's the same things that everyone needs everywhere in the world. Okay, and with respect to jobs, it's very frustrating. I mean, literally 10 years ago, I wrote a report with my colleague Naim Rashidi when we started BPRG about Serb integration in Kosovo. And we said that one of the most important things you have to do if you really want to integrate the Serb minority in this country is you have to make sure that they have sustainable jobs, because many Serbs are directly or indirectly employed in some way by the Serbian state, either in state institutions or in state-owned companies or in companies that in other ways depend in one way or another on Belgrade. That clearly is not sustainable, so you have to find some other things that people can do. And that has to begin with a kind of a snapshot of the status quo. And we said that 10 years ago, and I think we still don't really know. We don't have a granular sense of what the Serb minority actually does. So that, I think, is something that absolutely has to be done. And it's something where the government is going to be faced with a difficult choice. And the reality is, I think, that for many Serbs, it's not really possible to sustain a family in the private sector because the market is simply, there's a lot of bias in the market. People will not buy products with a Serbian name attached, at least not in many fields. That is something that is a legitimate thing to ask the government of Kosovo to work on, to try to see to it that this population, that it has now, with the extension of sovereignty to the north, acquired responsibility for the well-being of, it's incumbent on the government to make sure that this population of people can live here and can find, can make a good life. The other issues, and I don't have time, I think, to go into. I think we all are familiar with the problems with healthcare and education. That, I think, is likely to be a sticking point. That's my feeling. Security, policing, I think, also likely to be a sticking point. Maybe, and this will be the last thing, it is possible, in addition to working on jobs, to hope that the government can do something with respect to local governance, because this doesn't have to be seen as a concession to Serbs or a concession to Belgrade. It can be something that can be seen as an aspect of democratization and of Kosovo, all of Kosovo, so of all municipalities. The government can say, and I think should say, that we need to empower local governance here. That doesn't seem to be something they especially want to do, but it's not something that is maybe as difficult to imagine as extending autonomy to an association of municipalities. So on that note, let me wrap it up and.
Thank you, Marco. So now this question will go to all because it's directly related to the very topic of our dialogue. of our panel. But essentially, we can hear almost once a week EU spokesperson saying, Ohrid agreement is legally binding. Ohrid agreement is legally binding. It came to that point that I started to wonder if 1,000 times told truth becomes a lie. So let's start with this. So there's a better future. Dialogue has started working and delivering again. So there's a reset. But what happened in that future that we've came to a reset? First, what happens with the previous agreements? We've heard the ambassadors tell us that even if there's a reset, which they feel should happen at this point, that shouldn't reflect on what was agreed. But is that really the case? So what happened with the previous agreement? If there's a reset, who initiated the reset? Are we looking at the same actors? Marco gave his opinion on that. So is it again the EU supported by the US, or is it another set of actors within the EU? Like we had the Franco-German proposal. Is there even an incentive with some alternative actors to help out in the dialogue? How does a renewed dialogue look like? So maybe Dragiša, if we can start again with you.
Thank you, Milica. Thank you for this question. I really would like to reflect on something that Marco said first, and then I'll come to the perspectives of the dialogue. Reading of the situation in the north I wouldn't agree with you. In which sense? In a sense that, you know, this government maybe established the sovereignty in the north, but they are very unlikely to succeed in consolidating the north. It's very difficult. In order to have citizens who are going to actively engage in the system that has been established by this government, that's going to be very, very difficult. There are several ways. Lack of trust, one of the biggest. Lack of resources, another one. Let me tell you one thing which sometimes you don't have the information, or sometimes you simply don't look in that way. The budget of the Republic of Kosovo for the Serbian communities in Kosovo, for 10 Serbian municipalities, is about 45 million euro for all 10. Budget of the Republic of Serbia for Kosovo, budget of the Office for Kosovo and Metohija was, last year was 90 million. In 2024 was 105 million. And today they're discussing the rebalance of the budget with 128 million. So disparity in resources is enormous. So what does it mean in practice? In practice it means that 80% of families in Kosovo, Serbian families in Kosovo, and let alone other families, some Albanians too, they are covered with the salaries from Serbia, and 100% of them are covered with the services from Serbia. So even those Albanians who work, or those Serbs who work in the Kosovo government, there are really few of them. You can't find in the ministries a lot of Serbs working, but even they are covering 100% with the services from the government of Serbia. Meaning social services, meaning health services, education, many others. So it is not just to bring the boots on the ground. It's not just, okay, you will occupy the building. People don't go to their work, but they still have receiving their salaries. And when they receive their salaries, how you are going to engage a person who receives on average 700 euro from Serbia doing nothing into a private sector for receiving like 300 euro, 400 euro? That's the key issue here of this government. The second key issue is that Serbs will not participate They will just pull out from the institution. They will come back to the local level, because in order to win the elections in Zvečan, you need 100 Serbs, because there are no more than 100 Albanians living in Zvečan. So you can collect 100 elderly people and you will keep the local administration. But that is, the problem is that people will not participate. They will not get engaged. They will send their children away, they will send their money away, and they will stay in Kosovo just to end their lives. And that is the future. That's the future of Northern Kosovo and Serbian areas. So are we going to do something with that future? That's the issue. Or we are just going to say, okay, Serbs will fade away, and then at least we solve one of the problems. But that problem, then you will miss the Serbs from Kosovo are something that putting Albanians and Serbs together. Maybe not at this point, but as you can see, Milica and me, we are here as something who are connecting communities together. So it can work. It is not only, okay, let's put the pressure on them, and otherwise we'll see what to do. But I want to come back to the dialogue question as well. There is no dialogue. There is no new agreements. There will be a dialogue. There will be no new agreements. The agreement is on the path of the normalization of Brussels Ohrid agreement or Franco-German, or based on Franco-German proposals. That's the agreement. So there will be no new negotiations on the terms whatsoever. So it will be only how to implement that, whether you will implement or whether you will not implement. If some of the sides will not implement the agreement, they will take the consequence. And that game is over. There are some things people here don't understand, and I also haven't heard from the fellow panelists. Serbia is also doing unilateral acts. Serbia unilaterally implemented 5 agreements in December last year. Unilaterally. Nobody asked Serbia anything, but Serbia did it. That was on custom stamps, on driving licenses, on documents, and so on. And we had the President Macron, we had like a month ago in Belgrade, and he was publicly praising President Vučić for implementing these agreements. So in that sense, Serbia has been seen as a constructive part. It's not that I'm trying to praise Serbia for this. I'm just trying to explain you what is the pattern. On the other side, you have so many people, including the ambassadors this morning, says you have to do association of Serb majority municipalities. That is something that you have to do from 2030. And without that, you cannot go to the Council of Europe, as we saw. You cannot proceed in any matter. And Serbia will not pressure you on that. Serbia will behave on the dialogue in regard to this. We have President Vučić speaking 2 Fridays ago. He says, there is no Interpol, they're putting a pressure for us to Kosovo to join Interpol. We are not going to allow anything without association of Serb majority municipalities. So that's a direct question, a direct answer on something is going behind the lines. Some negotiations are always going. But this is the conditions are set. All the players, they know what they have to do. And the timeline is dedicated to what they're going to do is on their own. Let me give you another perspective. Kosovo submitted the application for the EU membership 2 years ago. And does anyone believe in this room that this application will be seriously taken in December this year? So most probably will not. And it will take another year, probably next year, and then you will lose the track. Because EU is really serious when they say we would like to take some of you guys by 2030. They're really serious. And then it is, if you lose the track, there will be a lot of time waiting for another track. like, we are talking about growth plan, which is a huge thing for the region. Even today, American ambassador mentioned that, not German ambassador. American ambassador says this is a huge opportunity for Kosovo. Does anyone believe here that Kosovo will get the first tranche by the end of October? To be honest, I don't. Kosovo still have punitive measures from the EU Commission. They hasn't been withdrawn. And that is the price. That is the price of unilateral actions. That's the price. That doesn't have, for me as a Kosovo Serb, I really feel sorry for this. This is bad for me. Not only for Kosovo government or Kosovo Albanians. This is bad for me. I really, in my conversation with international partners, I always say this is a bad decision. But it is a decision of EU member states, 27 of them. And it's very difficult to pull out. And now it will be a decision after decision. So I know it is a very difficult for the Kosovo society to accept some of the things from the dialogue, as it is difficult for the Serbian society, of course. I know it is very difficult for the politicians to make some of these decisions, especially now in the election year. But as long as decisions are not made, there will be no progress. And we are losing our new generations because of lack of progress. And that is the point here. It's not the point whether we'll have Serbs in the north or not. That's the point, that we are losing our generations. And that is irreversible process. And we are waiting for the next 10, 15 years, 20 years again to solve these issues. And you said there is no alternative. Of course there is an alternative. There is always an alternative. You see the Cyprus case. There is no any more negotiations on the Cyprus case. What Serbia is doing, Serbia is marginalizing Kosovo on this matter, and they are moving forward with the regional alliances and with the EU and global alliances. That's what Serbia is doing. And Serbia is going to do that in the future even more, especially after American elections as a important milestone. What Kosovo is doing, Kosovo is isolating themselves from themselves. It is the Kosovo government who isolate themselves. It's not, and even we can hear before. And are we going to enter another phase of 4 years where Kosovo is going to even more isolate themselves? That's not for me as a Kosovo Serb I can discuss, but it's not up to me to decide. But this is as I said, this is a decisive moment. Either we go in a positive direction, following what has been determined on the Euro-Atlantic alliance, or we are going into more conflict, into more events in the north, into more restrictions, barricades, all these things. That is, I think this is the right time to stop. But we are now, in the next 6 months, we are going to see what will be the future for the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dragiša. We maybe have another 15 minutes. So, Tefta, on the reset of the dialogue, so what happens, which actors are taking over, what happens to previous agreements, and of course, if you want to reflect on anything that has been said, that's a given.
Yeah, maybe I just wanted to come back to Banjska very, very quickly to just explain also how, however tragic it was and the way it happened, it has allowed for the ending of criminal structures that were existing in the north and were problematic for way too long, both for the Serbian communities there and Kosovo government. So Banjska happened, and there is a vacuum there which the current Kosovo government is using for electoral purposes as well, in a sense that when Prime Minister Kurti tries to convey himself as a tough defender of sovereignty and walks north today, that's very easy because there is an institutional security vacuum. So that's very, very easy for him. And meanwhile, in all of this, I think that Vučić is taking advantage of this because, in a way, the way I see it is that a next Kurti government might be beneficial for Vučić in many ways, but that's for another discussion. Coming back on the reset, I don't think we need a reset on the dialogue or a new agreement. The problem is not with the agreement. The problem is clearly with leaders that have used the dialogue platform or the dialogue itself for the domestic, for consolidating some form of popularity domestically. I don't think we also need a reset on the way the international community has engaged so far in this dialogue. We have never seen a stronger engagement of the international community in this process since 1999, where we have basically all actors united on one position, and I don't see that changing. The interesting reset that has already happened that is important for the context is, and that has been intensified with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, is the international community's priorities in the Balkan regions more broadly, and the relationship with Serbia. There has been a change of priorities where naturally today the Western partner in Western Balkans today is Serbia. And that, as we see, is concretizing with, Serbian government signing energy deals with US, signing military deals with France, lithium deal with Germany, but also how diplomatically Serbia is being defended in its positions. And as I said, it's intensified by the war in Ukraine and the geopolitical changes, which may have explained the need of the West to try to decouple Serbia from Russia's influence. However, in this new reset that has taken place in the Balkans, this is leading to Serbia's influence returning to somehow its pre-1999 positions. And I'm not speaking here only about Bosnia and Kosovo, but more generally North Macedonia and Montenegro as well. But again, this is another discussion. However, it does have an impact on the dialogue process as well, because Kosovo today is in a much, it's in a weaker negotiating position, and it needs to find a way on re-establishing a relationship with the West to defend its own interest. And at the moment, I don't see that happening in the current context. But there is an opportunity if there is a change in Kosovo next year. So the reset, to close with, I have a feeling I speak very, very shortly, but I hope it's okay. The reset that I think is needed is, one, the relationship between Kosovo and its international partners, so that Kosovo comes back to the negotiations and the dialogue in a favorable position, and especially the reset of Kosovo government's relationship with the Serbian communities, and this for all the reasons that my two colleagues here mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Teta. So Marco, I will go back to you after, because we have short, now at least 10 minutes. So maybe just to give it to an opportunity for the audience to either comment or ask. If there are questions, I will collect them. And if there are comments, then fine, I'll recognize them as comments. Just, yes, I saw just, okay, there's a girl. Just take the microphone so that we can all hear.
Hi, Petri Tselimi. Thank you for organizers for this event. Hello, friends. I think just two minor comments. Several times you mentioned the national elections as a very critical benchmark for next year, and obviously it's going to be very important for Kosovo Serbs to participate in one format or the other, but I think local elections, which are also next year, are going to be more important. People forget that next year there are two sets of elections, February and then probably October, November. Those that are in October, November are going to define who are the mayors in the north, how the association is going to be implemented. But that also means that we have a break between the two elections, and you never make good compromises in election campaigns. So this will somehow give excuse to political landscape to potentially be, again, maybe even waste the whole year, because it's a permanent mode of campaigning throughout next year. But that means that there's also a potential window of opportunity, because once you have a government, and hopefully there's going to be a reset in that government, documents can be sent to Constitutional Court and then pressure can go back to the Serbia to not do the same thing by blocking Kosovo Serbs to participate in next local elections. So I think that will be critical. The second note is I think Mr. Kurti has been very consistent. He has been consistent since 1999, 2008, and I do not believe that there can be any reset in dialogue or any change in dialogue, because neither side wants neither reset nor dialogue at this current juncture. Luckily, Kosovo is a democracy. Serbia is not a democracy, so that is one big, great advantage that we have, and that rotation of the government is possible. And the current ultra-isolationist approach that we have taken internationally, in which, as you have all noted, Kosovo has never been more isolated in its history, can change, and we can create potentially a new momentum next year. So mildly optimistic despite these undercurrents that I explained in point number one.
Thank you, Mr. Selimi. So we have another one here. Did you see? Third. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm Uroš from the European Movement in Serbia, from Belgrade. So I apologize for maybe a difficult question. It's my professional deformation as a political scientist. So when it comes to the Serbia-Kosovo normalization process, is the biggest stumbling block the community of Serb municipalities, or is this just a convenient excuse? And if it is, who do you think is mostly to blame? Is it Belgrade, is it Pristina, is it the local Serb population? Thank you very much.
Do you want to address it to a specific person?
Oh, to the whole panel, whoever is brave enough to tackle it. Yes.
Okay, that appears to be all, I think. So can we actually do go quickly on this question? So it was, and then Marco, if you want to respond to it, we'll start with you. And if you want to add something about the reset, that's also fine, that you haven't mentioned in your previous intervention. So when it comes to normalization between Kosovo and Serbia, is the ASM a founding block or a excuse? Yes, and whose fault is it?
Sure. I think the answer to your question is yes. Both, in other words. So it is both a stumbling block and it is also an excuse. And I think here we should remember that this has been extremely controversial and beyond controversial. I mean, it was sort of demonized within Kosovo political discourse from the first moment until today. So, you know, you can blame the current government for refusing to implement it, but you can also blame every previous government for also refusing to implement it. It is also true that there's a context here that, you know, when it was first pitched, it was pitched, you may recall this, or maybe, you know, maybe not, but in the first elections, post-independence elections organized by Kosovo in the north, the electoral slogan was, today we vote for Srpska, the Srpska list, tomorrow we build Srpska, Republic of Srpska. Okay, so that was, and that, the link was the association of municipalities. So it was pitched as something that would become a sort of quasi-independent thing, which was never realistic. But that came from Belgrade, and that, you know, contributed to this kind of poisoning of the concept. I think it is much more important to look at what the Serb community in Kosovo, the Serb minority in Kosovo needs, and to ensure that Kosovo itself, Serbia insofar as it's a participant in this, and the friends, the European Union, the member states, the United States, are working to make sure that that community has what it needs to serve, to remain self-sustaining, to remain a political factor, whether that is done through the association or in other ways. Because you can have it either way. Okay? You can have an association that gives the Serb community what it needs. You can also give the Serb community what it needs without an association, and you can have an association that is simply a kind of Potemkin village that doesn't really do anything. And I think this is something that I think the government would probably prefer to have eventually. I wanted to say something about the very opposite comment of Petrit Selimi. I agree with you. I mean, it's a blunt statement, but I think it's fair today to say that Serbia is not really a democracy, and that Kosovo is. We should recognize that Serbia used to be a democracy, you know, and it is possible that Kosovo will no longer be one at some point. So we need to, and this leads me into my last point about what a good dialogue would look like. I think the priority really is not so much dialogue. The priority now is going back to the basics, going back to Copenhagen, okay, going back to the Copenhagen criteria, and working with both Serbia and Kosovo separately to pressure them and to help them fulfill those criteria: democracy, rule of law, functioning market economy, especially minority rights. Okay, especially minority rights. Serb minority in Kosovo, Albanian minority in Serbia. Okay, in Preševo Valley is being very badly treated. Okay, so these things need to be you know, topic of pressure. I think this is probably not going to happen. I think, you know, the likelier outcome is going to be the bad scenario that Dragisha outlined. That, you know, I sort of regret that you don't agree with me, because I agree with you. So I think I didn't explain myself well. I think, you know, it is more likely than not that you're going to have, you know, a move toward what you and the Prime Minister described as a sort of situation of the Croatian Serbs today, of not being a political factor. I think this is what the government wants, and I think it's probably what it will get. And I think that will have the bad consequences that you know, that you have outlined, a frozen conflict that lasts for a long time. Insofar as we can avoid that, I think it is exactly by going back to the basics, by pressuring them to do the things that every country is supposed to do in Europe.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Dragisha.
Maybe just quick answers on these comments. Well, thank you, Patrick, for these comments. When speaking about democracy, I mean, Serbia is not a democracy, but that's, we all assume. But I don't know any Kosovo Serb who believes that Kosovo is a democracy. I don't see it. If you explain to me how Kosovo is a democratic country, maybe I will understand. But I really don't believe it. It's like repressions. We all face threats from the Kosovo government authorities. Institutional violence, all segments. You don't need to trust me. I mean, I said that many times. You just need to go to the north and speak with people. It's not, I don't need to be a gatekeeper to provide you what is the knowledge in the north. North is just half an hour drive from here. Just hit the road. Now you can travel freely. Nobody will stop you or do anything to you. And just speak with people. If they want to speak with you, they don't want to speak even with me. That's another problem, let alone with the journalists. But just go there. Just go there. Just go to Leposavić, go to Zubin Potok, to Mitrovica, speak with people. Get their feelings. I mean, it's very important to understand what is happening. Elections, very important. Elections, we have, you rightly pointed out that next year is a year of 2 elections. We will see the Serbian strategy very soon. I think even before the American elections, after American elections, that is a decisive moment. But we will see how Serbia will behave and how the Srpska lista will behave. Whether there will be a strategy for the parliamentary elections, whether they are going to win all 10 seats, 10 plus 10, I will say, or they will be satisfied with 6, 7, 8. And then we will know in the next couple of weeks, we will know on that. The local elections, that's also a very important benchmark. Everyone is waiting to replace this even Vučić admitted two Fridays ago, he admitted that it was a huge mistake on leaving the institutions, and now they're waiting for the time to come back. He asked for the elections extraordinarily. That's a nonsense, we all know that, but definitely Serbs will participate. But to which extent? I mean, the losses from the withdrawal of institutions is irreversible. That's a simple example. There are a lot of professionals, and I was myself, and working in a municipality as a, you have engineers, you have lawyers, you have a lot of people who are now in mid-40s, mid-50s, etc. They all left. And now the new municipality will not bring these people back, neither their energy. So you need new people to work in this administration. You don't have new people. These kids, they already left. So it will be a huge problem. It will be a huge problem, which is a problem of Serbian community. It's not only a problem of Kosovo government, but it's a problem of Serbian community, which nobody even understands the scale of this time, but it will be really challenging times. And just one remark, it was not a decision of, it was a decision of Vučić to let the Serbs from Kosovo to leave the institutions, but the request came from Kosovo Serbs. So they're the ones who requested to leave the institutions based on everything that is happening in the past. And they're the ones who are now also trying not to get engaged. So for Serbia, it is, I understand from Belgrade you get different kind of messages. Even Prime Minister Kurti yesterday, he commented about tabloids, etc. For Serbia, Kosovo is not solely or exclusively the problem of Kosovo Serbs. It never was. Serbs from Kosovo, they don't have the only rights for Kosovo in the eyes of Serbia. It's much bigger. And for the government in Serbia, it's very difficult to sell anything that comes from the dialogue. So Vučić is a good salesman. Let me be very frank with you. He's the only one statement who didn't lose the power and who didn't lose the elections on the account of Kosovo. We had Milošević. We know all how he did it and what he did it and how he ended up. We have Koštunica failing on Kosovo. We have Boris Tadić failing on Kosovo. We have even Đinđić, somebody says he got killed because he started solving the Kosovo issue. We have Nikolić, who was kind of a figure I don't want to comment. And we have Vučić in power for 12 years, dealing actively with Kosovo in the way that is only possible to deal in Serbia this sensitive matter. And when you, even 2 Fridays ago, he spoke about it. He says there are no good solution and don't believe in the nonsenses. And he also said, for the first time, the president of Serbia says, don't be deceived that Albanians didn't suffer that has been killed in Kosovo during the 90s. So we have a president of Serbia publicly admitted on a press conference. We didn't have these kind of things in the past. So things, as I said, it is not only about the dialogue, it's about everything else. Things are moving in various directions, and very soon we are going to see in which direction is going. Are we going in a positive way, or we are going more into radicalization?
Thank you, Dragiša. We are over our time, but I will not allow the lady doesn't, the only lady from the panel doesn't speak. So, Tefte, we can quickly have either an answer to this question, or maybe also the situation on what happens to Kosovo after the elections. We've heard that actually a kind of a coalition government might be, a bigger coalition government might be more realistic, but also we have to face the fact that we might again have Vetëvendosje and minorities government. So quickly, I know it's very early to judge the elections, but quickly on the ASM, so stumbling block or an excuse, and elections, how are things looking now for the elections?
So thank you very briefly on On the Association of Serbian Municipalities, I think it has been blocking the normalization process. Its implementation has been the reason that the normalization has also not moved forward, and that's not only under this government for that regard. So that's long overdue, and we need to find a solution, and I think we have one. But on the elections, it's early to say, and one can never know what happens. A lot is happening already in the campaign, as I mentioned earlier, and that is playing in favor of Prime Minister Kurti's party. However, there are some indications that the ruling party has lost some support. From what I understand, well, actually maybe this is a discussion for another format, but there might have been some cracks that might involve, that might compromise the support within the party. A lot of the young people that have supported the Vetëvendosja party in the past elections have left, unfortunately, not sure whether they will participate or not in votes. And there is a chance of the biggest opposition party to win considerable support to be able to form a coalition with Vetëvendosja, and here I would not exclude the possibility of a PDK-VV coalition in the next government, which with regard to the dialogue might be an opportunity, as it would share the responsibility of the implementation of the current agreement between two parties, one which has extensive experience in engaging in a dialogue with Serbia, but not only in other very important processes of Kosovo's state construction. And yeah, let's see how it all develops, but there is this possibility as an opportunity that we might just think about.
So thank you for the extra early prediction. Thank you for being so attentive. Dani is going to bring us through the reminder of the program now. We will be moving the stage and enjoy the rest of the panels.
Let's give a hand of applause to this panel. Okay, so please join me, those of you who want to. We will have a family photo. So you don't have to, but we would appreciate if you want to. So the panel can stay here. We'll do the family photo here on the stage. And let us start inviting people behind the scene. So much for your work. And we have, yeah, you said many times.